Joe Biden is trying to be Donald Trump.
Mr. Reagan.
Yes, Joe Biden gave a speech last night. Yes, I'm going to go through it. But what do I mean by Joe Biden is trying to be Donald Trump? That in one moment. First, I have to sell you something. Now, Bank of America has just lowered its 2022 forecast for the S&P 500 by a whopping 900 points to 3,600, saying that we are headed for a recession this year. Shocker, I know. It said the new year-end target is the lowest on the street. This is not good news for those of you stuck in equities or anything tied to the stock market. Thousands of people have put their trust in Noble Gold to prevent losing money in the financial storm that is brewing, and you can join them by calling their expert team. Noble Gold was recently voted the #1 gold company in the country by Consumer Affairs. There's no call centers, no scripted response, no bull, just a straight, honest run-through of your options so that you can decide. And by the way, they're giving away this beautiful gold 1/10 ounce American Eagle proof coin with every qualifying IRA or 401k rollover this month. You cannot go wrong with Noble Gold. Call the team now at 877-646-5347 to find out more or visit noblegoldinvestments.com. That's noblegoldinvestments.com. So what do I mean when I say Joe Biden is trying to be Donald Trump? Well, what conservatives saw last night is a viciously authoritarian speech. Who knows who wrote it? Probably Hillary or Barack. And do watch through to the end of the video because I will break down each and every insane moment of this ominously despotic address. But Chris, you say, Donald Trump does not give viciously authoritarian, ominously despotic speeches, and you're right, he doesn't. But the left thinks he does. Here's what I think's going on. Joe Biden's approval ratings have been dropping month after month throughout his presidency. I think that recently his administration brought in a marketing team, a team of people that could rebrand Biden. And I think that this team thought Biden bores his supporters. Trump excites his supporters. Let's turn Biden into Trump. And so what's my evidence? In recent days, Joe Biden has been doing Trump-style campaign rallies.
West knows all about MAGA Republicans. He's running against one of them. That's why West described him as so far outside the mainstream that it'll be dangerous in the governor's office.
He's been tweeting a lot.
Just over the weekend, he posted a blistering tweet. "We cannot allow an out-of-control Supreme Court and Republican elected officials push an extreme agenda that takes away freedoms and personal autonomy."
The recent string of viral tweets that went out from the White House Twitter account.
And then I learned Meghan Coyne had been hired as part of the White House social media team at the beginning of this month.
He's been calling his political opponents by a catchy new term. In this case, MAGA Republicans.
Well, the alternative to the Democrats are the MAGA Republicans. MAGA Republicans. These MAGA Republicans, the MAGA Republicans. So how extreme are these MAGA Republicans? MAGA Republicans. I don't respect these MAGA Republicans.
These are all hallmarks of Donald Trump's style. I mean, I guess they're using the strategy, if you can't beat him, become him. I mean, giving your political opponents a creative, inventive name of derision, a name like Sleepy Joe or Pocahontas, that is a classic Donald Trump move. And now Joe Biden has started using MAGA Republicans to refer to Trump supporters. But of course, the Democrats are doing this all wrong. Trump only gave derisive names to his political opponents, not to all Biden voters. Trump condemned the deep state. He didn't condemn half the country. And even with names like Sleepy Joe and Pocahontas, there was a dose of comedy in there. But with MAGA Republican, there is no comedy. MAGA Republicans is a derisive term with no round edges. It is being evoked very specifically to label Trump supporters as dangerous extremists. This is not being done as a joke. It's being done in order to stoke hate. Now, some people are speculating that this is to dehumanize us so that when they start rounding us up and sending us to the concentration camps, Democrat voters will believe that it is justified. And although I do think that that very well may be true, I think that there is a more immediate objective: the midterms. I believe that the strategists, the marketing team in charge of this Trump-style rebranding of Joe Biden, I think that they believe that the only thing that energized Biden voters in 2020 was a hatred of Donald Trump. And so they need that hatred to win any of the toss-up 2022 midterm elections. And so we come to Biden's viciously authoritarian, ominously despotic address to the nation last night. In order to fire up his base, Joe Biden has been instructed to radically change the tone of his public addresses. No longer is Joe Biden the senile old fool trying to look presidential. No. Now he is a senile old fool trying to look like Donald Trump. But the problem with this is that Democrats don't understand Trump. They don't understand Trump's popularity. They don't understand Trump supporters. Leftists think that Donald Trump's success is due to provocative, divisive rhetoric. But Trump is not successful because he uses provocative and divisive rhetoric. He's successful because he speaks the truth. And this misapprehension by Joe Biden's handlers is extremely dangerous because, you see, the left thinks that Trump is Hitler. And so in trying to turn Joe Biden into Trump, they're actually turning Biden into Hitler. Now, the perception that we have of Adolf Hitler is that he told people what to think. We believe that Hitler manipulated the German public to his way of thinking. And this is how the left perceives Trump and Trump supporters. The left thinks that Donald Trump told Republican voters that illegal immigration is dangerous, and we just all believed it. The left thinks that Donald Trump told Republican voters that climate change was a scam, and we just all believed it. That overregulation was killing American jobs, and we all just believed it. That Democrat politicians were corrupt, and we all just believed it. The left thinks that Donald Trump told Republican voters that the 2020 election was fraudulent, and we all just believed it. The truth is, Republican voters knew all of those things before Trump did. When Trump said them, we all just went, that guy gets it. It wasn't that Trump was manipulating Republican voters. It was that Trump agreed with Republican voters. That's why we like him. That's why we voted for him. He just sees the same things that we see. And Trump is willing to tell the truth about a lot of things that most politicians are too scared to even talk about. The point is that Democrats don't understand Trump and they don't understand Trump supporters, but they think they do. And what they think is that Trump is like Hitler and Trump supporters are like the Germans who supported the Nazis in Nazi Germany. That's what they think. In fact, we are worse than the Germans because we have a viable alternative. We have MSNBC and CNN and Politico telling us what to think, and yet we still choose to follow Trump. So we're even more evil and more stupid. Trump said this, so we ought to believe it. That's what they think of us. But that's not who we are. That's not what the MAGA Republican looks like. This is what the MAGA Republican looks like. The guy you're looking at right now. Me. I am the MAGA Republican. I'm not uneducated. I'm not stupid. I'm not evil. And I'm not gullible. I'm an old-fashioned American man. I believe in God, and I follow Christian values. But I'm not what the left imagines when they say MAGA Republicans. No, they think we're all idiot cultists. And those who control Biden, they think that they can use the Trump idiot cultist template to create a similar movement on the left. If the MAGA movement is a Hitlerian-style cult of personality, well then, they are going to create a Hitlerian-style cult of personality on the left. And so they've turned Biden into Hitler. They've even got the impressive Nazi backdrop. This is a mistake. Those rebranding Biden, they think that this new authoritarian style is going to excite Democrat voters. It isn't. Only the most radical, hateful, far-left extremists are going to be excited about this despotic rhetoric. Any Democrat who is at all moderate will have watched that address with grave concern for the future of our country. So let's go through Biden's viciously authoritarian, ominously despotic speech, and let's break it down.
But as I stand here tonight, equality and democracy are under assault.
The first thing Joe Biden says in this speech is that democracy is under assault. Now, if you didn't watch this speech and you only heard people talking about it on Fox or whatever, you might think that Biden was being crazy and authoritarian in just parts of this speech. But no, this entire speech was about the danger of conservatives. How Republican voters, MAGA Republicans, as he calls us, are going to destroy democracy. That was the point of the speech. And that was the entirety of the substance of the speech.
Too much of what's happening in our country today is not normal.
Well, I agree with that, but probably not for the same reasons that he's going to say.
Donald Trump and the MAGA Republicans represent an extremism that threatens the very foundations of our republic.
There it is, right off the bat. We threaten the very foundation of our republic. Well, at least he called it a republic, so all the pedants out there will be happy about that.
Not every Republican, not even the majority of Republicans are MAGA Republicans. Not every Republican embraces their extreme ideology. I know, because I've been able to work with these mainstream Republicans. But there's no question that the Republican Party today is dominated, driven, and intimidated by Donald Trump and the MAGA Republicans.
So now this is a critical part of the speech because this is the disclaimer, right? This is the way that, leftists on MSNBC and CNN are going to argue that, well, Biden didn't claim that all Republicans are bad, just a small group of extremists.
He did two things, I think, in his speech, which one was to say, I'm not talking about all Republicans, I'm talking about MAGA Republicans, and making that distinction.
But this is just a rhetorical trick. He doesn't actually distinguish in any way all the MAGA Republicans from regular Republicans. He does provide defining qualifications for MAGA Republicans later in the speech, and we'll go over that when we get to that point. But the truth is that Biden wants Democrats to believe that anyone who supports Trump is a dangerous extremist. If you have a neighbor or a friend or a brother or your father or your grandma, if anyone you know supports Donald Trump, they are a dangerous extremist. And this is an insane message. And I've come up with 3 reasons why I think that this is really crazy. I mean, really crazy. First of all, it's not true. It's just not true. Secondly, not a lot of people are going to believe that their Trump supporter grandma is a dangerous extremist. And so it's not even effective. I mean, first of all, it's not true. Secondly, it's not effective. There's no point in really even doing this. 3, if anybody does believe this, Biden might very well be creating real extremists by lying to everybody and telling them that Trump supporters are extremists. You will very likely get a few gullible maniacs who will go around shooting Trump supporters because of this speech. They're always saying that if you criticize the FBI, you're putting the lives of FBI agents in danger. If you criticize Pelosi or AOC, you're putting their lives in danger. But hell, we can lie about Trump supporters all day and pretend that they're insurrectionists and this grave threat to democracy. No problem. The difference here is that we know the FBI is corrupt. This has been well established over the past few years. On the other hand, Biden's handlers know that, quote, MAGA Republicans are not a threat to democracy. They are lying in order to stoke hatred just to try to win votes. I mean, hopefully nobody gets killed because of this rhetoric, but if somebody does, this is going to be one hell of a backfire.
And here, in my view, is what is true. MAGA Republicans do not respect the Constitution. They do not believe in the rule of law. They do not recognize the will of the people. They refuse to accept the results of a free election.
Now, this was a real WTF moment for me watching this. It is such a bizarre thing to hear a Democrat saying that Republicans don't respect the Constitution. I'm like, what? But that is the lie that they're going with. This stems, of course, from the January 6th protest. They're still trying to push this idiotic claim that the January 6th protest was an armed insurrection. Of course, this is nonsense. I think I told you guys that a leftist that I know tried to debate me about January 6th, and when I pointed out that nobody who went into the Capitol on January 6th had a weapon, he pushed back with the fact that, and I'm not joking, the shaman guy was holding a flagpole with a spear tip. So in his view, a bunch of middle-aged conservative Americans from the suburbs casually walking through the Capitol taking selfies can unironically be referred to as an armed insurrection because one guy was carrying a cosplay spear flag. And this is how far gone some Democrat voters actually are. There are a lot of leftists who truly accept that what happened on January 6th was an armed insurrection. It's an obvious lie, but here's why they believe it. And this, I think, is the only reason. This is a lie being told by the so-called president. This is a lie being told by CNN. This is a lie being told by MSNBC. This is a lie being told by the New York Times. There are a lot of people who will truly believe things that they see in the news without thinking about them at all. They'll just accept it as true because somebody on CNN said it. That's it. That's the reason. And I know that this is the reason because one of my friends who's a conservative, he complains all the time about his mother because his mother is a Democrat. And whenever he talks to her about this stuff, the reason she gives him for believing all of this crap that the Democrats say is, and I quote, they wouldn't lie to us about that. That's what she says. That's what she says every time. And that's what I think a lot of Americans think. And if they would just think about this stuff for 1 second, they might just realize, wait, hold on, that doesn't actually make sense. But I think that the truth is that they don't want to think about it for 1 second. They don't even want to let it flash into their mind for even a moment, because they know that if they do, they're going to wake up, and they don't want to wake up because they want to believe that conservatives are evil. They want to believe that Democrats are good because they're Democrats and they want to be the good guys. People have a really hard time imagining that they're wrong about things, especially big, important things. Nobody ever wants to be wrong, and that's what keeps people in the trap of being wrong.
And they're working right now, as I speak, in state after state, to give power to decide elections in America to partisans and cronies, empowering election deniers to undermine democracy itself.
Okay, this was another WTF moment. Republicans are working to give the power to decide elections to partisans and cronies and election deniers. Now, forgive me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure that is exactly what the Democrats did in 2020. He's warning us the Republicans are trying to do what Democrats actually did. I have said this a million times, but I'll say it again. You always know what crimes Democrats are committing if you just listen to what they're accusing Republicans of.
MAGA forces are determined to take this country backwards to an America where there is no right to choose, no right to privacy, no right to contraception, no right to marry who you love.
MAGA forces? Oh gosh, now we've got forces, guys. Okay, so we are apparently determined to take this country backwards. No right to choose. Like, to choose to take a vaccine? No right to privacy. Like, privacy from the FBI raiding the home of President Trump? And you know what? Nobody's for a ban on contraception or for banning homosexuality, you absolute lunatic.
They promote authoritarian leaders and they fan the flames of political violence that are a threat to our personal rights, to the pursuit of justice, to the rule of law, to the very soul of this country.
Hey guys, we promote authoritarian leaders and fan the flames of political violence. I had no idea. That is crazy that I do that. I didn't even know it. You know, I always thought I fought against authoritarianism, but I guess I was promoting it all along. You know, it's kind of ironic that they've staged this whole address as if it's the address of an authoritarian dictator, and you know, he kind of sounds like he's fanning the flames of political violence, but at the same time, he's accusing us of doing all of that stuff. It's so weird.
They look at the mob that stormed the United States Capitol on January 6th, brutally attacking law enforcement, not as insurrectionists who placed a dagger at the throat of our democracy, but they look at them as patriots. And they see their MAGA failure to stop a peaceful transfer of power after the 2020 election as preparation for the 2022 and 2024 elections. They tried everything last time to nullify the votes of 81 million people. This time, they're determined to succeed in thwarting the will of the people. That's why respected conservatives like Federal Circuit Court Judge Michael Ludwig has called Trump and the extreme MAGA Republicans, quote, a clear and present danger to our democracy.
This is one of the most concerning parts of the speech. Now, whoever wrote this speech knows that this is not true, and whoever approved this speech knows that this is not true. Even Biden knows that this isn't true. And yet, in this part of the speech, Biden is saying that not only is he saying affirmatively that the protesters on January 6th were definitely trying to stage a violent coup and take over the government through the use of force, which, again, they know is not true, but he's also saying that in 2022 and 2024 that Trump supporters will do this again. He's suggesting that you and I, Trump supporters, that we are going to go out with guns and try to stop a free and fair election from taking place. Now, even if we were to pretend that January 6th protesters were trying to stop the peaceful transfer of power as leftists claim, they would have been doing so because they believed the election was not free and fair. They would have been doing it in order to protect democracy. So this idea that Republicans are somehow against free and fair elections, a threat to democracy, it's not just disingenuous, it's absurd. It's absurd on the face of it. As I suggested earlier, all one has to do is think about this stuff for 1 second and it clearly makes no sense. But if they can make Democrat voters believe that we are the enemy, that we're dangerous, well then maybe they can stoke up just enough hatred to retain their majority in the Senate.
And now, America must choose to move forward or to move backwards, to build the future or obsess about the past.
Yeah, stop obsessing over the past, guys. Who cares what happened in the past? 2020, that's ancient history. Why do you keep bringing that up? Yeah, Biden won by 81 million votes, the most votes of any president in history. He really was that popular. Why is that so hard to believe? Just accept it and let's move on. Nothing to see here.
Nothing to see here.
I mean, we don't need to look into laptops of people named Hunter. We don't need to investigate the FBI for the stuff that happened way back in 2016. Why are you guys even talking about that stuff? You're so obsessed with the truth and justice and all that lame stuff. Come on, man. Be cool. Just move on. Let's progress. That's why we're called progressives. Get it?
MAGA Republicans have made their choice. They embrace anger. They thrive on chaos. They live not in the light of truth, but in the shadow of lies.
That kind of sounds familiar. You know what? Let's listen to that again, 1940s style.
The Jews have made their choice. They embrace anger. They strive on chaos. They live not in the light of truth, but in the shadow of lies.
That Joe Biden, plagiarizing again.
History tells us that blind loyalty to a single leader and a willingness to engage in political violence is fatal to democracy.
And here you have evidence of what I was talking about before, this misapprehension of what a Trump voter is. He says blind loyalty to a single leader. Whoever wrote this and whoever approved it, these people all believe that we, MAGA Republicans, have blind loyalty to Donald Trump. That is so ignorant. It's just ignorant, okay? If that's what they think of us, they have no idea who we are. Trump is not successful because we are loyal to Trump. Trump is successful because Trump is loyal to us.
We here, you've heard it, more and more talk about violence as an acceptable political tool.
What the f*** is he talking about? We hear you've heard it. More and more talk about violence as an acceptable political tool. Who is talking about that? Nobody is talking about that. You see, this is a Democrat trick that they've been using for years with this whole white supremacist crap. They say there's all these white supremacists in America, and there's all these idiots that watch CNN and they believe it because even though they've never seen a white supremacist in their life, they think, well, they just don't live around me. But I'm sure they're out there because why would they lie about that? Well, no, not really. They're not out there. There are like 6 white supremacists in America left, and they all live with their parents. I mean, this is the same kind of lie. There's more and more talk about violence as an acceptable political tool. Well, no, there isn't. But the folks who watch CNN, listen to NPR, read the New York Times, they're going to believe this because they don't actually expose themselves to anything conservative. They're never going to watch Mr. Reagan. They're never going to watch Glenn Beck. They're never going to watch Fox. They're never going to listen to conservative radio. They're never going to read Breitbart. And so they're just going to accept that, well, Biden said it, so it must be true. All those evil conservative media folks are talking more and more about political violence as an acceptable political tool. Literally no one is talking about that. The problem is that Biden knows that nobody's going to fact check him on this because fact checkers are all left-wing political propagandists.
We saw law enforcement brutally attacked on January the 6th.
False.
We've seen election officials, poll workers, many of them volunteers of both parties, subject to intimidation.
Lie.
And can you believe it? FBI agents just doing their job as directed, facing threats to their own lives from their own fellow citizens.
Not true.
There are public figures today, yesterday, and the day before predicting and all but calling for mass violence and rioting in the streets.
You mean like Maxine Waters and AOC?
And if you see anybody from that cabinet in a restaurant, in a department store, at a gasoline station, you get out and you create a crowd. And you push back on them. And you tell them they're not welcome anymore, anywhere.
Like, once someone doesn't have access to clean water, they have no choice but to riot.
Yeah, that's not a Republican thing. That's a Democrat thing.
We can't be pro-insurrectionist and pro-American. They're incompatible. We can't allow violence to be normalized in this country. It's wrong.
No one is pro-insurrectionist, you moron. We reject your characterization of the January 6th protesters as insurrectionists. And of course, he and his puppet masters know this. They don't care about truth. They just want to gaslight Democrat voters into getting angry and voting against Republicans in the midterms. This entire speech is an attempt to characterize Democrats as the party of law and order and the Republican Party as the party of violence and chaos. And after the BLM and Antifa riots of 2020, it is pretty shameless to try to frame things that way, if you ask me. In fact, it's amazing to me that they think that they can get away with lying this much to the American people. But sadly, despite seeing with their own eyes that this is not true, some people will believe this crap. Democracy endures only if you just accept the results that we give you of every election without question. Guys, you're not allowed to ask whether or not there was election fraud. If you ask that question, you will kill democracy. Just believe us. Drink the Kool-Aid.
But democracy endures only if we, the people, respect the guardrails of the republic. Only if we, the people, accept the results of free and fair elections.
You mean like Hillary?
And ask yourself this. Within an hour or two of the Hollywood Access tape being made public, the Russian theft of John Podesta's emails hit WikiLeaks. What a coincidence. So, I mean, you just can't make this stuff up.
Again, Democrats always accuse us of what they are doing.
Democracy cannot survive when one side believes there are only two outcomes to an election. Either they win or they were cheated.
You know, sometimes people have legitimate reasons to suspect voter fraud. I mean, I don't know if he's seen 2,000 Mules, but it's worth a watch.
I will not stand by and watch. I will not, the will of the American people, be overturned by wild conspiracy theories and baseless evidence-free claims of fraud. I will not stand by and watch elections in this country stolen by people who simply refuse to accept that they lost.
But, okay, if you're not going to stand by, then what are you going to do, Joe? What you planning there? I mean, you don't sound like a violent authoritarian despot at all.
I will not stand by and watch the most fundamental freedom in this country, the freedom to vote, and have your vote counted and be taken from you and the American people.
You see, right there, when you say stuff like that, you kind of do sound like a violent authoritarian despot. The reason that sounds a little insane is that no one is talking about taking this right away from anybody. That's totally made up. What it sounds like, and forgive me if I'm wrong here, what it sounds like is that you've decided to make this false claim that we Republicans plan to somehow take over vote counting, perhaps in some violent way or something, and you're going to use this false claim in order to maybe take over the vote counting yourself, or maybe in order to just hide the vote counting from any Republican who might want to oversee the process, or maybe even to justify imprisoning Republicans who try to ensure an accurate and legitimate count of the vote. That's what it sounds like. So, I mean, starting to sound a tad evil authoritarian dictator there, Joe.
MAGA Republicans look at America and see carnage and darkness and despair. They spread fear and lies. Lies told for profit and power.
I don't know why he keeps characterizing us with these ridiculous, over-the-top descriptions. I mean, I know we're not supposed to compare politicians to Hitler, but he really does sound like Hitler.
The Jews only see carnage and darkness and despair. They spread fear and lies. Lies told for profit and power.
I mean, really, though, he sounds a lot like Hitler.
The MAGA Republicans believe that for them to succeed, everyone else has to fail.
Man, do I have to do this again? Okay, fine.
The Jews believe that for them to succeed, everyone else has to fail.
Biden, please, honestly, stop plagiarizing from Adolf Hitler. It's weird.
We need everyone to do their part. So speak up, speak out, get engaged, vote, vote, vote.
And so the whole point of this, as I said, was to get people to vote, vote, vote. But not for Democrats, but rather against MAGA Republicans. Because you see, those darn MAGA Republicans are just so dang dangerous.
For hundreds of years, the U.S. has had a political system comprised of two competing parties. If you were to declare one of those parties criminal and illegitimate, what would you be left with? Well, you'd be left with a one-party state. And that is what Joe Biden is calling for tonight, a one-party state.
And I think he's right. Leftists are always saying that Republicans want a civil war. But the truth is that I think a lot of leftists want to goad Republicans into some kind of violent action, at least some Republicans, so that they can label all of us violent extremists and then essentially eliminate the Republican Party. And even a leftist that Chris Hayes brought on to MSNBC after Joe Biden's speech kind of hinted at this, which I thought was really surprising.
1860, this country was in big jeopardy. And Lincoln cast the election of 1860 by saying, the House can't stand half slave or half free, we've got to choose. 1940, when Franklin Roosevelt was running for a third term, he said, look, what is really at stake at this moment is whether our children are going to get to live in an American democracy, especially with Hitler and the fascists looming in Europe and marching. And just as Lincoln gave the House divided speech, just as Roosevelt gave a speech on the State of the Union about the four freedoms, as you well know, 1941, here is the time when President Biden is chosen. He realized that this is an historic moment, and what you heard, I think, comes out of that.
So this guy thinks that Joe Biden's speech is very similar to speeches that American presidents have given in the past just before we go to war. That's a little unnerving. So, yeah, I mean, I do think Democrats are trying to dehumanize Republicans, to unperson us, to create so much hate and so much animosity that Democrat voters won't feel bad if we are summarily shot after falsely being accused of treason or perhaps insurrection. Biden's controllers want Americans to believe that we MAGA Republicans are the unclean leopards and that we must be cast out. Biden's new strategy is exactly what they accused Donald Trump of. He's stoking hate. Well, that's it for me. And remember, it's not that the liberal friends are ignorant. It's just they know so much. That is not so. Good night.
We're at war with the most dangerous enemy that has ever faced mankind in his long climb from the swamp to the stars. And it's been said if we lose that war, and in so doing lose this way of freedom of ours, history will record with the greatest astonishment that those who had the most to lose did the least to prevent its happening.